Hey everyone, welcome to Strange Stories, where we explore near-death experiences and supernatural stories from people who've had a glimpse of the other side. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. Without further ado, let's get to the story of the day. Story number 1. I was a sophomore in college. A former roommate had married and was expecting a child any day now. Her husband was required to travel out of state for an interview. They called to see if I wanted to spend the weekend with my old roommate. I couldn't wait because we always had so much fun together. We drove to their small one-bedroom apartment after they picked me up. Her husband had left, leaving us alone in the apartment. I noticed the apartment was extremely cold. When I inquired about it, she stated that a repairman would be arriving later that evening to repair the furnace. We bundled up and I hand-stitched on a coat I was making. 3 hours later, a man arrived and fixed the furnace. Good. We'll be warm now, I thought, as I smelled the gas turn on. After about 15 minutes, I became extremely sleepy and informed my former roommates that I was going to bed because I couldn't stay awake any longer. That was just before 9 p.m. She was surprised that I wouldn't be as much fun as she'd hoped. She woke me up around 10:30, saying we needed to talk and catch up on old times, but I couldn't stay awake. We had previously told each other frightening stories. She finally fell asleep. The door then woke us up at 1 a.m. Someone was pounding on the front door and window. We were both startled awake. "It's the rapist." My girlfriend grabbed my arm. I couldn't have been more terrified. She walked up to the front door. She told me to look out the window to see who it was before she opened the door. When I looked up, it was her next-door neighbor whom we'd seen leave for work around 5 p.m. I blacked out before I could tell her. I stumbled backwards, knocking a stereo off a small table and hitting my head on the fireplace brick. The chaos and fear of the moment had me in a tizzy. Then, as if by magic, I found myself in an instant peace. I looked down on my body as it lay there, amazed at the complete and total peace I was experiencing. At that moment, I realized that simply being in a body was excruciatingly painful, and the pain had vanished. I started ascending. I watched my body fade away as I passed through the ceiling and into what appeared to be fog clouds. I kept climbing through the fog. My thoughts were clear. No one had better be sad. This is fantastic. What a wonderful time to return home. I'm not in any pain and I didn't realize I was. I hope no one is depressed. This is the ideal time. Then I noticed a marble entryway leading to a marble room. The entryway was flanked by tall, large marble columns on both sides. The room was about 20 by 30 feet in size and didn't appear to have a ceiling. A man walked through the door from the other side of the room. He was dressed in a white suit with a white tie, a white shirt, white shoes, and white socks. He held a white clipboard and a pen in his hands. He was 2 inches shorter than I was. I was 5'9". He simply stated that there had been an error and that I should return. I told him there had been no mistake and that I would like to stay. I could tell he was pretty sure I was going back, so I made a quick decision to rest my case that it was a good thing I was there. I told him I was single, didn't have any children, didn't have a husband, wasn't in any relationship, and had left home, so it wouldn't be too difficult for my parents or friends. The timing was ideal. Then he explained that I simply didn't understand and that I should reconsider. I was certain it was flawless. I had the impression that I had a choice between staying and leaving, and it was his job to persuade me to return. He opened up a large view in front of me and took away what I was seeing. "Oh, I guess I'd better go back," I said to the kind man about 20 minutes later in relative Earth time. I was in my body at the time it was being dragged down an icy sidewalk. "Oh, you're alive," the 2 men dragging me said, almost dropping me. I couldn't say anything because I was coughing so hard and crying so hard. They put me in a car and got a blanket for my bare feet, followed by one for my shoulders. My girlfriend was taken from her neighbors' homes and placed in the car. She was completely unaffected by the gas. We were taken to my girlfriend-in-law's house and stayed for 2 days. What had happened, I told my girlfriend and her mother-in-law. My girlfriend said she thought I was dead, that when the neighbor saw me black out through the window, he became even more hysterical in his attempt to get her to open the door. When my girlfriend opened the door, she said the cold, fresh air was so different from the air in the apartment that she knew would have been severely gassed. She was taken to the next apartment, where she claimed she saw the neighbor drag me outside into the snow and leave me there for 15 to 20 minutes while he went to get help. When he returned, he and another man attempted to pick me up and drag me to the car when I began coughing. They assumed I was no longer alive. On the bright side, the next morning when I called my home, my mother answered the phone and I said, "Mom, I almost died of gas last night." "What did you eat?" she asked. Then I explained what had happened. It had nothing to do with food poisoning or beans. My girlfriend was not in any way harmed. Her baby was safe from the gas that had leaked or been poured into the apartment. I told a high school friend who took me skiing the following weekend about what had happened. He laughed at me and wondered where I'd gotten my head. After that, I didn't say much about my experience. I knew what had happened. I knew I'd crossed over. I knew I could only remember a small portion of what was there and that whatever had been shown was substantial enough to persuade me to return. I did tell my grandmother about it because she always worried about dying. I hope I was able to assist her in finding some peace in it. Since then, I've never been afraid of dying. In fact, I look forward to it because I know I won't be able to go until the time is right. Story number 2. I became like a breath after my death was breathed into the body of a naked, non-gender being. I was standing alone on a bare, sandy beach in front of a fairly calm body of water, with an open blue sky above. I was perplexed and terrified. A small patch of clouds appeared in the center of the horizon, which I realized was approaching me. As it got closer, I realized the clouds were actually beings, and as the beings got closer, I realized they were lions, 7 of them, with enormous wings. I examined them closely when they were close. Their wingspan was so large that they seemed to encompass the entire horizon. Their paws were enormous and curled under in a relaxed manner. Their faces, on the other hand, were human, with eyes that were fierce, kind, and loving in ways I'd never seen before on Earth. I felt only comfort now, as if nothing could ever hurt me. And I felt an overwhelming sense of joy and contentment. This is when I was resurrected. I believe that if I hadn't been revived, I would have been escorted away by these incredible creatures. I've always been able to see this image in great detail, and it's beautiful to me. When my mother realized I was unconscious, she called a family friend who is a registered nurse, who walked her through my resuscitation. I received no medical attention after that, despite the fact that I'd suffered brain damage. Petit mal seizures plagued me throughout my childhood, and my short-term memory was permanently harmed. It was summer, and my older sister was throwing a 15th birthday party for a few of her friends. We had an in-ground pool with a slide that was separated from the rest of our large yard by a privacy fence. When my sister and her friends were about to leave, I said, "Hey, watch," and slid down the slide on my back, head first. The girls left as soon as I hit the water, not knowing that I'd hit my head on the square plug at the bottom of the pool and split my head open. I was knocked out cold. I curled up into a fetal position and inhaled water. The sun shone brightly through the water, and I noticed blood pooling in front of me in contrast to the blue pool. I don't remember feeling any real pain or panic. I have no concept of time, but I was eventually able to see our house from an aerial view of about 80 feet. I saw our house's roof, the entire yard, and my sister standing at the gate on the other side of the yard, about 60 feet from the pool fence. My mother was mowing the lawn around the apple trees, which were quite far from the house. I also saw myself curled up on the bottom of the pool, a tiny figure with blood pooling around my head and neck. I was then whisked through a tunnel of rainbow lights at an unfathomable speed for an unfathomable amount of time. I emerged at the entrance to a lovely garden, in the center of which was a hall of open pillars with a serene blue sky and white clouds. Small plants and rocks surrounded the first few pillars, which then extended into a mist. There was a presence to my left, but no sound came from it. A woman sat sweeping on a stone to my right, being counseled by someone wearing a simple white garment. I could hear their conversation, even though no words were spoken. She was grieving her own death and worried about her granddaughter whom she was about to leave when she died. However, she had died of an incurable illness and was unable to return, and her counselor was comforting her by communicating that her daughter was grown and would be fine. I could feel the pain in this woman's heart. I was not directly counseled and felt very calm. I knew I had the option of passing down the hall or returning to life, unlike the woman who refused to accept her death. I wanted the relief of continuing down the path ahead of me, but I could also see my body in the pool, and I realized that by leaving that life, I would be giving up a priceless experience. That no matter how great or small my accomplishments were in this life, or how difficult this life may appear, that the human experience is invaluable and precious, and that everyone's life is this way. I turned my back on the pillars and awoke in my body before being discovered by my sister. I opened my eyes briefly before passing into a deep darkness until my sister discovered me, pulled me from the pool, and resuscitated me. I was possibly dead for about 10 minutes, possibly longer. Because we were in the country, the drive to the hospital took about 30 minutes and I was on the verge of passing out. I contracted pneumonia after the incision on the back of my head was closed with 15 stitches. My short-term memory, which had been harmed by my previous drowning, did not appear to be affected in any way, as far as I can tell. My memory problems began with the first drowning and did not worsen after the second. This strikes me as odd. However, on the way home from my week-long hospital stay, we passed a small house on a country road that was very unremarkable, but I immediately knew many things about it, as if I'd lived in it and knew who lived in it. This was my first experience with psychic intuition, and I've learned to not only live with it, but to rely on it. I do, however, keep it hidden from most people.